name is Sherilyn Lee, and I'm a poet. I'm an essayist, and I'm here to share some of my written word with you. Some things that are kind of on my mind. On last Saturday, the poet Phil Levine passed away. For those of you who aren't familiar with poetry, he was the former U.S. Poet Laureate, as well as a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet. And one of the things about Phil there was so many great things about Phil, but one of the things that he said in an interview with Mona Simpson in the Paris Review was that women give more in a teaspoon than men do in a snow shovel.
Yes.
And clearly a Phil Levine fan and a woman in the front row, which is fantastic. I love it. The other thing about Phil is I have a kinship to him. He has one of the big poetry prizes. And a couple years ago, I was honored with a shortlisting, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, oh my gosh, my poetry is actually in this ballpark. I'm in Phil Levine's Dodger Stadium, and that was a huge nod. The other thing he mentioned, he always talks about work. He worked in he's from Detroit. He worked in a soap factory. He worked on the transmission lines at Cadillac, and he says about work, it never ends. And for God's sake, try to get a job you like. Because if you have a job you like, it doesn't matter that it never ends. And specifically speaking to the piece that I'd like to share with you tonight, I'm not exactly sure what it is. Is it a poem? Is it an essay? It's somewhere in between. But in an interview with NPR, actually not too long before he passed away, people always ask him, why do you talk about work? And he says, well, people that I write about, they don't show up in poetry. But the other thing he says about work is that I believed even then that if I could transform my experience into poetry, I would give it the value and dignity it did not begin to possess on its own. And with that, I'd like to share with you my first piece. It's called States of Matter. The client reminded me of the spring deadline. I smiled, assured him that tomorrow's design review would be the last, and we'll start building this week. My stomach tightened. It won't be pretty. Design reviews usually weren't. The owner will first shout at our extreme incompetence, threaten us with our jobs, all in the name of saving humanity. But more importantly, his intellectual property rights. Funding ran short. His greed was draining. I hung up the phone, my jaw gripped, the day stuck in my throat. Just get through this double-booked minute. Then the next fucking one. Then the next. I picked up my laptop, clamshell open, ran out to my next meeting, then tripped. The laptop flew out the door, my left eye and cheekbone hit the door jamb. For the first time in months, I stopped, stunned. Tears, my freshly skinned knee burned, afraid to cry. I sat up, grabbed my laptop, and it powered right up. Rocket ran over, kneeled next to me, lifted my chin. You hit your head pretty hard, he said, his eyes tracking mine. We hadn't worked together very long. Rocket was all business, using his Air Force pilot first aid training to triage me. But it had been so long since someone had looked into my eyes so closely. I gasped and blinked back another wave. The next day at my therapist's office, I stopped talking because I cried so hard. It's okay if you need to cry, he said. I never cried there. I usually just swore. No, it's not. Because I have too much shit to tell you, I said, then dropped my fist into his red couch. Tears rolled over the bruise under my left eye. I was beginning to thaw, and it had already been a long winter. I promise you I'm going to talk about some upbeat things, but here's another downer thing. So, I promise you. This is another grandmother story, not quite the one that Valerie told.
No, you didn't share that?
No, I don't have that kind of grandmother story. I'm glad you do.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So a bit of another thing that's kind of in my mind, aside from Philippines passing, is that today, in 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had signed Executive Order 966 into law. So some history lesson, this is the law that actually allowed for the internment of the Japanese. And many of them were interned in camps throughout the United States and held without due process. And if you see in your social media and the news, people are talking about never again, never forget. And I'm a fifth generation Japanese American, and this poem I'd like to share with you is about my grandmother. Again, not your grandmother, about my grandmother. And we're from Hawaii, and so how does that work? Do you intern half the state? Like, what's going on? So war's a crazy thing, and there's so much richness here in America, and everything doesn't fit everybody, and laws don't, it can be kind of crazy. So here we go. The Rice Princess. Nobuko, age 6, left the territory of Hawaii for Japan in the care of her grandparents, who died soon after. There wasn't enough money to return to Kauai, so she learned to sing. A neighbor farmed her family's land, every harvest paid for boarding school, where classmates called her the Rice Princess, and she learned to sew. Like her friends, she wanted to teach in Korea, but the talk of war divided the family like the ocean. Leave Nagasaki, come home to Hawaii, her family insisted, and she loved to read. With the sale of the last harvest in her pocket, she returned to Kauai, and her family she hardly knew. So many siblings and cousins in Kaloa town, and a language even more foreign. In 1940, her lack of English suspicious to the Bureau, they pressed. Scared with no military secrets, she burst into tears. The policeman gave her his handkerchief, told the Howley investigators, she doesn't know anything. And there she was, 19, too old for school, so she worked for a British family, learned English, cooked, polished silver, until Mrs. Tanaka, the appliance store owner's wife, said that my grandfather ought to bring her some orchids on Saturdays. So there's definitely a happy ending there. I want to take a moment to thank Abby and thank a.wake, and what a great evening this is. This is, I think, my third time with you, and probably fifth or sixth time attending. I've seen Nira a million times. She's fabulous. Isn't Nira fabulous? And one of the things for me is, because I write and I sit behind a screen, I also blog, and you can catch that at SherilynLee.com. I also blog, and I started that by working with a.wake. I started a sonnet project, never wrote sonnets before, because I was part of a.wake. And a.wake also gives me the opportunity to get out from behind the screen and create relationships with people, which is writers don't do. But it's been really fantastic, and thank you. Thank you so much, Abby, for this. The other thing that's on my mind, of course, is you're like, wow, she listens to too much NPR. Is that Toni Morrison had her 84th birthday yesterday, and she's a treasure, right? She's amazing. I had the chance to see her speak a couple years ago. Just to even be in the same theater as her brain is, wow, she's amazing. When her book Paradise was published, she said, I am always trying to say what it is, what the truth really is. I never avoid the risk. And so I wanted to bring that into a.wake tonight. This next poem I'd like to read for you is from a chapbook that I have. All proceeds go directly to Abby. I make no money off of this, so if you want to copy my chapbook, come and see me afterwards. From the chapbook. This poem is called The Heat That Ripens, and I chose this because this too was an inflection point in my poetry career, and where I tried to go for the truth. The heat that ripens. The heat that ripens seems dangerous because I don't mind its warnings. like when it softened a moment into a kiss between us sitting on a rooftop, way too late one November night, under an American flag flapping in the breeze, snapping to get my attention. But I was already tangled between your fingers, climbing up the sleeves of my sweater. Your cigar smoldered in the ashtray. Its waft pulled my chest tight, but even burning couldn't bring me back now. And finally, I wanted to share a brief essay. Again, this is about the grandparents that I mentioned before. But when I come to a.wake, I always feel like, oh my gosh, this show is so fabulous, I want to go do something. And Grant, my boyfriend, is a photographer back there, he's like, that means you want ice cream. And I'm like, but it's not just that I want to go out for ice cream afterwards. Fat kid for life, total fat kid for life. So, but I do, I leave here inspired by what I see. And tomorrow, it happens, if you're of this creative ilk, there's something, it's a hashtag, because everything has a hashtag, yes, called 1,000 Speaks, and the number 1,000 Speaks, Google it, do what you need to do. And it's 1,000 bloggers, 1,000 voices talking about compassion. And something that this world certainly needs any day, not just February 20th. And so if you're like, yeah, I'm pumped and I gotta do something after a.wake, hey, check it out. Some people who did teach me some about compassion are my grandparents that I talked about before, and I'd like to read this personal essay about them. And this is my last piece for tonight. It's called How to Be Elderly. Some of you have a long way to go. Okay, how to... Listening to stories like, when I was 30, and I'm like, God, I don't even remember being 30. I was like 30. All right.
I'll remind you.
Thank you, Valerie. All right. How to be elderly. I have spent the last few weeks living with my grandfather, age 95, and grandmother, age 91. They are in good health, live by themselves in their own home, even grow much of their own food in their garden. By practice, they are subject matter experts in aging. Grandma and Grandpa negotiate the delicate balance of independence and interdependence that aging requires. Here's what I've learned from observing them. Be kind to yourself today. Do it now. Here's why. You're creating your history in this very moment, right now. And this one too. I don't know what your elderly mind will retain, but if you're fortunate, the act of remembrance will probably become a daily activity. So make as many happy, rich memories as you can, and put only meaningful thoughts into your mind and heart. Give your future self the luxury of choosing from a high-quality selection. Similarly, some writers believe that there are only 7 stories in the world. This seems especially true after turning 80. Live a good story. Your 7 stories will be your playlist. Upon greeting friend, stranger, relative, your mind will press play. You will automatically shuffle and repeat them. They will become the words you never get tired of saying. You will want others to understand how you lived, that you weren't always this old, and that you still feel young inside. Go for a walk every day. Look around. Perhaps say hello to a neighbor or a friend, or just enjoy the fresh air and sunlight. You'll do a lot of sitting at home, probably in front of a very loud television later. Love everything in your home. This includes people, things, and how everything functions. If you have clothing you don't like, broken furniture, unused appliances, get rid of them, and if needed, replace them. If basic daily rituals like getting dressed or preparing food are not simple or smooth, revise them. Make finding important things easy. The scissors, the car keys, the post office keys, they belong in the kitchen drawer near the fridge. Stamps, checkbooks, and bills, they go in the tray in the sewing room. Everything has only one place where it belongs. Write the date of purchase on everything like canned goods or over-the-counter remedies. Have a big print calendar on your kitchen wall to track all your appointments. Practice patience now, so you can be just a little bit better at it later. Being old is frustrating. You will struggle with yourself in the strange new world that has replaced the one you knew. Your physical and mental abilities will vary daily, sometimes even hourly. Some moments you will be sharp, precise, but sometimes you can't even decide whether something hurts. Take a moment, sit down, have something cool to drink. When you're ready, try again. Learn how to reheat food. Get really good at asking for what you want. Be specific. You will not be able to do everything you once could. People will want to assist you, but you have to articulate your needs. If you ever wanted to learn a craft, language, avocation, or just do something that takes a lot of practice, start it today and practice a few minutes every day. Being old takes an underestimated amount of energy and strength. The 5 to 10 minutes you spend now will take an hour when you're elderly. Nurture your dream. Sometimes you will want to be so tired that you'll want to die. Not all the time and not every day. You won't say this as a dramatic ploy for attention. You will say this simply because you have lived for so long. Warning, this revelation may seem shocking to young people, so exercise caution when saying this. Drink a cup of green tea every day. It can't hurt. Find someone who looks kindly upon you. Not just the person who will say, go like this when you have a piece of rice stuck to your chin, but in those moments when you can't hear well or can't understand him, he will wipe it off for you. Let him straighten your collar before you leave the house. Offer him a snack. Sit on a bench and laugh together every day. Make caring for one another a habit. Thank you so much. I'm Sherilyn Lee.